Welcome, dear friends, to Kardec Radio at 11 p.m., nourishing our souls with the Spirit of Truth. The Spirit of Truth is this book that was psychographed by Chico Xavier and Waldo Vieira when they were living in the city of Uberaba. And they psychographed messages from several spirits. Eurípides Barçanufo, Bezerra de Menezes, André Luiz, Emênio Meimei, Anália Franco, and many others, Hilário Silva. And today we have another one, Manuel Quintao. We're going to talk about him. This book was published in 1961 in celebration of the Gospel According to Spiritism, which is right here. The Gospel According to Spiritism was published by Kardec in 1864, but when you go inside, majority of the chapters have spirit instructions. If you go to the end of the chapters, you're going to find a section that Kardec titled Spirit Instructions. So he had his comments, and then he had messages that were received by mediums talking about life. And the beauty of this, the beauty is that there are messages here that were psychographed by mediums at Kardec's time in 1861. And 100 years later, Emmanuel and his team, through Chico Xavier and Waldo Vieira, bring comments mostly about those messages. It's all about the truth. Why do we need the truth? Because the truth sets us free. You and I are being called to face the truth, to understand the truth, to visualize it in our lives, and to allow it to take place. Are we ready? I don't think so, because we need to grow more mature. But let's absorb the truth that we can today. Because as we mature spiritually, the truth has different facets. It's as if we're looking at a house from one side and we think, oh, this house is blue. And then we walk to the other side. Oh, no, it's blue and red. And then we take a helicopter and we see blue, red, green, yellow, orange. You see? It didn't mean that when I saw it blue, it wasn't blue. It was blue. And that has been happening with us for so many lives. We have been presented the truth and we're absorbing little by little. But this life is different. It's a life when we come with the message of Spiritism, which was brought by the Spirit of Truth, by Jesus and his team to us. And today, Manuel Quintao, look at him. All right. He comes and writes about the lost poetry. But who was he? Manuel Quintao was born in 1874 in a city in Rio de Janeiro, the city of Valença. And he died in 1955 in the city of Rio de Janeiro. He was a journalist, a writer, and a spiritist medium. And he was president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation, which had its main headquarters then in the capital of Brazil, the city of Rio de Janeiro. You know that the capital of Brazil has been in the city of Brasilia since the 60s. But before then, when he was living, Manuel Quintao, he was living there in Rio de Janeiro, the capital of Brazil, and he was president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation in 4 times. In 1915, re-elected 1918, re-elected, and then 1919, and then 1929. So he was president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation exactly at a time when the Spanish flu hit. Very meaningful to all of us. And tonight, you're getting to know of him. I'm getting to know more of him, and especially about the wisdom that he gained through the teachings of Spiritism. He loved studying Spiritism, and today he's going to come to you and I, mentioning a highlight in the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 6, which is the Promise Consoler. And he mentions item 4. The Promise Consoler, right? Jesus promises another consoler, the Spirit of Truth. Spiritism has come at the stated time to fulfill Christ's promise. And the Spirit of Truth presides over its establishment. It calls humans to observe the law and teaches all things by enabling them to understand what Christ said only in parables. These are Kardec's comments, and he, in the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 6, item 4, Kardec finalizes saying, Spiritism thus accomplishes what Jesus said about the promised consoler, the knowledge of things that enables humans to know where they have come from, where they are going, and why they are on the earth. It is the call to the true principles of God's law and consolation through faith and hope. Wow. Really? How does it change our lives? It changes everything, right? Because when you and I understand why we're here, where we've come from, and what is ahead of us, it changes our perspective. But there are many people who are living in this world, and you know it, who have no idea about it. They have no clue whatsoever. We're still learning. But that's why we're here at Kardec Radio, to share the news, to share why we do this, why we're here. And Manuel Quintao today writes a message titled Lost Poetry. Lost Poetry right here. Manuel Quintao, Lost Poetry. He begins, the consoler is the omnipresence of Jesus on earth. That's what it is. At the influx of the celestial benevolence, the consoler asserts the thoughtless gestures of the individuals who groan spurred by trials. The consoler appeases the blasphemous screams that rise from many mouths with insatiable refinement of pride. The consoler recomposes the burning faces by the fire of multiple passions and uplifts the exile by remorse, who hide in devouring pains, amnesiacs in the rectification that fate retraces for them. The promised consoler. And now he's going to say 2 sentences in Latin, and we're going to give you the English translation. He says, the promised consoler, sursum corda, which means lift up your hearts, res non verba, facts instead of words. So lift up your hearts, facts instead of words, following the Christ dictates, the consoler's dictates. Never fire the targeting name because the voluble eyes cannot fix the glimpse panels at the top. Remember that all human scenes have their spiritual backgrounds. If you live longing for inner peace, sustain the empire within yourself. Dust, the ash of prejudices that dance in your mind like shadow dust, darkening your reasoning. Replace ideals with the new colors of joy, hope, and courage in fighting errors, often thousands of years ago. Extend a good thought of saying, uh, a good thought to the skeptics wandering in the maze of contradictory questions, stung in the inner duel of doubt. Flee the roaring voice of censure, so that your lips may celebrate the years of others with expressions of advice and accents of comfort. Edge the sword sweetly and softly. Repeat your own blessing when your voice is lost among the cries of those who start to shout rebelliousness and advance, terrorized in burning paths. Help the unhappy mothers who seek little children shed tears as they transmute themselves into the emaciated parlor of death. Caress in the warmth of the invigorating fraternal sentences, graying and throbbing temples that beg you for some affection. Unravel the veil of weeping agony of those who cry in secret in the sarcophagus of their inner darkness. Pour comforting prayers among the pilgrims of death who did not prepare for the great journey and carry their heart in tramples from astonishment to astonishment before the perpetuity of life. On every road, there are smiles of tears and rain of tears of affliction. But the love with Jesus Christ recovers the lost poetry along our way, because only Jesus transform the miasma in perfume, fire in light, thorn in flower, desert in garden, and fall in elevation. Manuel Quintao. We know this message is deep. He is not writing a poetry, though he has some poetic pictures here, but he begins by talking about the consoler as the omnipresence of Jesus. And he ends, let's observe the structure, and he ends by talking about the love of Christ, the love with Christ, and the pathway with the Christ, which is truly transformative. So you and I are not here today to know of one more message. That would be fruitless because we know. You may say, Vanessa, I already know it. I agree with you. We kind of know. But what is Manuel Quintão saying that we don't know yet? Whenever we read these texts, because they are new to us, we need to ask, what have I not observed yet? So we learn with the style of the author. We learn with the history of the author. So he was a journalist, a writer, a spiritist medium. He discarnated, came back. He discarnated in 1954 or 55. And this was brought in 1961. So not too long afterwards, we received messages. And he didn't change his mind. Do you think sometimes everything you're learning with Spiritism, you're going to say, yeah, when I discarnate, I'll double check? Because if we do, everybody who came back confirmed. And even those who disbelieved it, who didn't believe in it, after discarnating, they're like, oh my God, it was so right. So What didn't we know that he's telling us? First, he let's observe the words he uses. He uses the word consoler several times. He repeats the consoler, the consoler, the consoler, the consoler all the time. And it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7, pretty much. And he gives adjectives about this consoler. At the influx of celestial benevolence, the consoler asserts the thoughtless gestures of individuals who grow inspired by trials. So he talks about those who will be consoled. Who is going to be consoled? Those who are happy in drug addiction because people think they're happy. Jesus said, I have not come for the healthy, but for the sick. But you may say, but Jesus, who is not sick on earth? Good question. But the thing is, nobody tells you until you tell yourself. So we want the help. Do you? Do you want the help? Because some people, they say, I already know. I know. I don't. So the consoler comes to help all of us in our remorses because of our passions, in pride, insatiable pride, in thoughtless gestures. And he says, lift up your hearts. Sursum corda. Lift up your hearts. He's saying, let us bring, what does lift up our hearts? Optimism, hope, faith. And he says, facts instead of words, res non verba, meaning let us practice. You and I are so tired, right? Let's share the truth amongst ourselves. We're tired of knowing, not doing, not being coherent. We're tired of it. We're like, I want to get out of this. I do too. So being coherent in thoughts and feelings will manifest in words and actions. So this is the basis of it all, our inner. So if I work on the way I think, the way I feel, I'm going to manifest the new belief, the new feeling. It's inside. If I spend the whole day just repressing myself, it's not going to help. Because repression doesn't transform. It has to be sublimation. It's a transformation from a state to another. It's when I'm used to reacting to certain stimuli and I learn a new way of not reacting, but taking action. Think about illnesses. Whenever we fall ill, and we're living this pandemic, and many people fall ill, discarnate, etc. It's really a time on earth when we're being called to a big review inside of us. In previous lives, whenever we got sick, we got desperate, so now, based on what we know, we will see disease from a different angle. As the blessing of God allowing us to drain to the body the disturbances of the perispirit, drain to the body. We're going to drain it. It's a new way. As Many say Dr. Andrew Weil. We see Dr. Wayne Dyer before he discarnated saying, and Louise Hay, before we shoo away a, let's say, a disease, let's talk to the disease. Let's learn the lesson. That's what he's saying here. He's saying the consoler is bringing us new directions. So we don't need to fight life. We don't fight life. He says, if I long for inner peace, I need to sustain that inner peace inside of me. Because there are some people who say, I want peace, I want peace. But we can demand it from others. It needs to be from us. Dust the ashes of prejudice that darken our reasoning. We are at a time on earth when prejudices are surfacing. We can no longer hide. But we need to put a stop at this. It is a prejudice when we believe that our family is better than somebody else's family, that our race is better than somebody else's race, that the color of our skin is better than somebody else's color of skin, that there are so many things that we are prejudiced against. We need to go deeper because that darkens our reasoning. It blinds us. And whenever there is prejudice, we're lacking something. Charity. We're no longer equal. There's a lot of pride. So he says, replace ideals with new colors of joy, hope, courage, in finding errors often thousands of years old. So, what is my ideal? Do you have ideals in life? People have ideas, but we're talking about ideals, which is a very noble goal. Do we have ideals? And he says, replace them with joy, hope, and courage to fight these old things. There you go. Because sometimes I know people come to me, they feel pressure. They say, Vanessa, people have goals and I'm lost. Like, should I have a major goal too? Like, because people brag about themselves, right? It's so terrible when people pretend it's like Prozac society. It's like you talk to them like, hey, everything is great, everything is great, everything. We don't need to complain to people, but we can't brag saying everything is great and tell, yeah, we just had this trip and then we just bought this and we just did. Pretending that life is a game of competition. We won't be happy that way. These are not ideals. So he's saying the ideal of the immortal soul should be to be joyful, hopeful, and courageous, facing our millennial mistakes, conditionings that are not healthy in us. Extend a good thought to those who are skeptic because they have a duel of doubt inside of them. It's so hard. We remember Louis last night in the previous chapter talking about not condemning because people suffer. I cannot imagine what it is not to believe in God, not to feel that God is the center of our lives. And here we have Manuel Quintao telling us about, being quiet if we're going to say things that hurt people. He says to us, be sweet to those who are in need of help. Help the unhappy mothers who have children to care for. And he says, in fraternal sentences, help the people who need affection. who are in the agony, saying comforting prayers. Today, nowadays, people ask us, what can I do during this time? How can I help? There's so many ways of helping. Praying for everybody. Everybody means all of us. You may watch people in the internet and think, oh, they're smiling, they're happy. No, you and I are no different. You have a life just like mine and vice versa. We have to work, pay the bills, etc. We still have a physical body, just alike. Things happen in our lives. We pray for one another. And that is the poetry of the gospel that can no longer be lost. Why is he talking about poetry? Because he's saying about the poetry of Jesus, the poetry of the gospel, the good news. When Jesus came to us and delighted our minds, and to date he does, showing us about the beauty of the good news. Yes. Joy to the world, the Lord has come. It's such a joy. It's not Christmas. You're like, Vanessa, it's not Christmas. I know, but it should be every day. So he's saying, because Jesus, love with Jesus recovers the love poetry along our way. So if you're depressed or sad, discouraged or angry, let us love with Jesus, and he's going to transform the bad odors in perfume, fire in light, thorn in flower, desert in garden, fall in elevation. Friends, with Jesus, there is always a solution, said Dr. Bezerra de Menezes at the very beginning of this book. With Christ, there's always a solution. Let us pray today, oh dear Christ, with you. There's always a solution. We feel your healing hands transforming our hearts, ridding ourselves of anguishes, of sorrows, ridding our hearts of grudges, to the day we forgive and forget, and we love only. Let us exercise in the next 24 hours, seeing things in our lives and seeing the presence of the poet of all poets, Jesus Christ, and allowing him to transform our day in true poetry. Wherever we see him transforming in true poetry. It's an exercise of our artistic mind in our loving feelings. A big heart. The poetry of Jesus, where love is everything. Thank you, friends. We wish you lots of blessings. See you tomorrow.
Oh.